The Mystery of BELICENA VILLCA. Second Book. The Letter of BELICENA VILLCA. 54th Day. When Nimrod and Ninurcha were convinced that the sonic ray could not against them, they prepared to invade the threshold. The corridor was enough wide, as advance 5 men at once, thing that they did on the run. At the head was the spectral figure of the Princess Issa, followed by Nimrod, Ninurcha, and the rest of the archers, except for a dozen who remained to guard the entrance. Such cavern, constructed with the objective to terrify the aspirant to serve the demiurge, had the walls covered with monstrous low reliefs, and mysterious and impious legends. Were also lateral doors to certain chambers, where the demon Doma used to present herself in lascivious nudity, surrounded by a court of prostitute priestesses. She is in charge to guide, and bewitch, the adepts who ignore the dangers of the sexual magic. These and many other hallucinative traps, destined to produce confusion and submit the will of the ingenuous aspirants who usually dare to cross the threshold, are mounted, lurking, in the endless longitude of the sinister corridor. But none of such tricks could stop to those who were beyond the senses, those who only listened the voice of the pure blood, to whom their determination had taken to fight in heaven. The Cassit vanguard had already traveled a longitude of 2 fields when the tunnel ended abruptly, opening in 3 halls, one next to the other, in which entrances large inscriptions in many languages allowed to know that they were in the Temple of Ignorance and Apprenticeship, or in the Temple of the Fraternity, or in the Temple of Wisdom. The first hall was empty, except for an altar with the hated symbols of Enlil. The second one possessed 2 altars and 2 enormous columns of basalt on its entrance. The third one consisted in a sumptuous altar, and with a coffin and wall and roof gravens, the most obscene and accursed symbols that no one could conceive without losing the reason. And in all the halls were rich carpets, and tapestries covering floors and walls, and aromatic incenses that impregnated the space, softly illuminated by many oil lamps. The 3 halls, so curiously decorated, constituted, undoubtedly, an unused spectacle to those skilled warriors who minutes before were in a humble city of the desolate. However, these strange ambience could not be appropriately appreciated by the Cassits, because the struggle started as soon as they passed through the first hall. There are a group of guardians of the threshold, High-Anarchin, similar to those who, Nimrod decapitated moments before, were closing them the path. Even by their fierce appearance, and being quite big in size, those monsters of the black magic are not very effective in the fight. They have born from copulation between the traitor gods and the females of the animal man, in the ceremony of the Shabbat, which is very ancient, from the age in which those practices destroyed the Atlantis. Thousands of such demonic beings live in Shambhala, or Kampala or Dajung, etc. They are completely idiots and serve in the armies of the Great White Fraternity. However, there are people more idiot than the High-Anarchin. They are who believe them to be angels, or aliens. The guardians surrounded the old semi-naked bald man, of yellow race, who seemed to be an inhabitant of the distant Kunlun Mountains. He had in his hand a dorji, or scepter of power. This is a powerful transducer that permits to operate as a key, or trigger, in the entire great resonant machinery that is the material universe. The scepter, a rod of spherical head made of stone, emitted a reddish ray that hit the chest of the general Ninurcha, throwing him fulminated to the floor. But the enemy had no chance to rejoice of this hit, because an accurate arrow traversed the heart of the yellow demon, provoking such extraordinary response, great confusion amongst the High-Anarchin. Now, the clash became inevitable. While some demons dragged the corpse of the old man to the hall of the apprenticeship, others were going, swords in hand, towards the Cassits warriors. A rain of magical arrows fell over them, but in such reduced place, soon, the distance became shorter, and they had to fight hand to hand. Riddled demons had already fallen, and others didn't delay to follow them by the effect of the Cassits' swords. Nimrod opened a clear space between the attackers and, followed by his squadron, he passed to the next hall. There, the struggle became fierce, and was seen that the number of demons was high. But Nimrod was ecstatic. He had distinguished, through the second hall, a resplendent personage, who was coming to the attack. He was peering for moments through the Sapience's temple, from a door that seemed to have access to a large courtyard, but after screaming orders, he went away to barge past two other clumsy Hywanarching. He was a Nephilim, one of the traitor gods, but Nimrod, impressed by his divine appearance, and enormous white wings, took him at the own Enlil. He pointed carefully, and shot when the image of the Nephilim was drawn on the door. The arrow traced a soft curve in the space, and reached directly to the chest of the demon, bouncing as if it had hit a rock. "Dog Nimrod!" screamed the Nephilim, with his face disfigured by the hate. "This is how you answer to our offer. Now, you'll die, you and all who come with you. Will be grass for our Hywanarchim, who, by the way, have good appetite." Once said this, he went away from the door, while a throng of demons erupted towards Nimrod, when he was observing horrified how many Hywanarchim were devouring fiercely the fallen warriors. This vision made that the Kasset king released a scream of threat, while his sword maintained that line the attackers. He was watching that the casualties amongst his elite of archers were terrible. It was in that moment, when he gave the order to search reinforcements. Thereupon, thousands of warriors erupted in the damned temples of the Synarchic initiation. Soon, the Hywanarchims were surpassed, and Nimrod had the time to gather the surviving archers. Less than the half of them remained, but the reinforcements were impressive, at the extreme that they reached to saturate the three temples that had been already taken. Nimrod spied through the door, in which he saw the Nephilim, and he realized that it took to a courtyard of an enormous palace, in the midst of a cyclopean city. A breathtaking scenery is that they were in the heart of Shambhala, near to the palace of the king of the world. The conjure of the Kenet initiates had been such effective, supported, of course, by the mystery of the pure blood, that the serpent of fire had flattened the seven walls. The tunnel of the Synarchic initiation crossed them, to permit that the disciples of the Demiurge could reach to the Masters of Wisdom. But, it is convenient to make some clarifications. Even by what the Kenetes initiates and Nimrod did, it is not about magic, the key to reach to Shambhala, but strategy. Would be worthless, that someone could open the door, if his spirit is dogmatized, or is victim of any of the psychological tactics that the wide fraternity employs, to fulfill the universal synarchy. For this reason, the real feat of Nimrod was to cross the tunnel and the three temples with weapons in hand, what speaks, and will always speak, of the purest blood in the earth. Because, those places are the most powerful deceit's chambers that exist in the world. Nothing can be compared with it, neither the drug treatments employed by the secret services of Occident, completed with hypnosis, nor any other system of psychic programming. Those who end there, useful personages to the synarchy, heads of state, religious men, kings, rich and influential people, presidents of corporations, etc. They return completely bewitched, disposed to work fully, to comply with their mission. They are the initiates of the synarchy. They have died, and reborn. But what really died on them, is the spirit, the memory of blood that now, submersed in a total strategic confusion, will be never felt again. In the exterior courtyard of the Temple of Wisdom, where the brave Kassets had entrenched, an entire legion of Hywanarchim swords in hand, and many squadrons of Shaidim, dwarves of earthy skin, awaited esquired. These dwarves, with huge head, are the product of the ritual copulation between men and certain animals, during the orgies of the Atlantean black magic. Transported in mass to Shambhala, after the Hecatomb, they dwell in gloomy caverns, and realize every kind of works for the masters. Recently, they have been rediscovered in Occident, as accompanists of crews of UFOs, but, in reality, they are an ancient terrestrial species. They dominate an anti-personnel paralyzing weapon that gives the sensation of cold, and can produce swoons, but is not mortal. They show themselves aggressive, and are to be feared if they're unknown, and without the necessary knowledge to neutralize them. But when they are losing, are cowards and flee. They are ferocious carnivores, but they don't like the human flesh, as the fierce Hawaiian king. They are the responsible of the cattle theft, animal mutilations and blood suctions. Also the Hawaiian king usually take a meal with unaware citizens, who never appear again. The view of the exterior courtyard could not be more horrifying, but Nimrod desired to face the coward Nephilim, and avenge the nightmarish casualties provoked amongst his men by the giant anthropophagites. For it, he traced a simple strategy. He would send the infantry in horde followed by vanguard of spearmen. Behind would remain the elite of archers protecting the rearguard, and shooting permanently to the most secure targets. In the confusion, Nimrod would try to reach the Nephilim. Diamin Nephilim, whose name was Cockabill, one of the 200 traitor gods, who came from Venus, followed the right-hand path, and founded the White Fraternity, or the occult hierarchy of the earth, was leading his hosts shielded by an enormous pump fount. His aspect was dazzling, because these demons are proud and they usually feel pleasure, showing a beautiful appearance, trying vainly to compete with Christus Lucifer, Lord of the uncourted beauty. Nimrod gave the order to attack, and a horde of Casset's warriors launched against the closed formation of the demons. The dwarves shot their belt weapons, and produced some tumbles amongst the first warriors, but promptly was noticed that the impetus that they had would make possible to stop them in such way. Dozens of arrows started whereas both vanguards clashed, generating a tremendous struggle. In that moment Nimrod, who had apparently moved on inverse way, fell with 2 leaps over Cockabill, trying to cut his neck with a sharp dagger made of jade. That weapon, coming from China, was recommended by Issa as very effective to beat down the demons. Rolling in mortal embrace, 2 Hyperborean enemies, the White Nimrod and the Tenebrous Cockabill, were risking their illusory lives, trying to stab each other. Was something not seen since 8,000 years ago. But their bodies belonged to 2 different races. Cockabill was huge, almost the double size of the brave Nimrod, and that physical advance, added to his hate, constituted an energy almost palpable, searing, put in trouble to the Casset king. "Die, dog Nimrod!" screamed the Nephilim, whereas he was pressing the neck of the Casset king, surprised in mortal fight hold. "Die, and return to the infernal world of the mortal humans." The bones of the unfortunate king started to crunch. "Idiot Nimrod! Do you want to conquer heaven? The punishment will be terrible. We'll chain you in such manner that you will return to the mineral consciousness, or, even worse, to the elemental world of the etheric larvae. And you will delay millenniums to free yourself from the wheel of karma, damn Nimrod. And with your people, we will make a definitive lesson. It will be erased from the face of the earth. But your defeat will be always remembered by the Hamitic lineage of Eve." Crack! Sounded sorrowfully, the spine of Nimrod was broken. "Ha, ha, ha!" Cockabill laughed cynically. "It really looks good on you, that name. Nimrod, the defeated. Thus, you will be remembered, dog Nimrod. Ha, ha, ha!" The Nephilim howled horribly when he realized that the knife of jade had penetrated until the hilt in his waist. During the whole fight, Nimrod had tried to nail the weapon, but this slipped on electrostatic emerald mineral precipitation that protected him. Finally, when he felt dying, he diffused his consciousness in his blood, as the Hyperborean manner, and he let his arm be guided by the primordial impulses. And then the hand, terribly armed, was shot directly to a point of the Nephilim's waist, over the liver, where a Keka vortex generated a weak point on the emerald. Now Cockabill was dead, and he would never live in this universe again, such is the mystery that the Nephilim demons of Changshampala try to hide. But Nimrod was agonizing next to the giant corpse when Cockabill fell. A sudden bewilderment emerged amongst the demonic hosts. notwithstanding the voices of the other coward Nephilims, encouraged them to fight without retreat. The massacre was terrible, and the blood had already covered great part of the courtyard, planted with hundreds of corpses. A squadron of sappers started to burn the adjacent corridors, and soon the palace that was evidently evacuated was burning. In middle of the confusion, some warriors seated the archer king next to the babbling fount, and they saw him smiling, whereas twinkle of the ravenous tongues projected dancing shadows on his face. They saw him talking with the spectrum of Issa as well. Some of them could even hear clearly what they said. "O Issa, where have you been?" "Far away, brave Nimrod," responded the dead initiate. "Enlil, the monster of fire, transported me out from the terrestrial world to the house of his master Shamash. The Sunday I saw there a city of fire, with the most infernal demons than anyone could imagine. There were 11 gods, similar to Enlil. And one of them, O Nimrod, that is impossible to be described by any mortal without running the risk to lose the reason. The most abominable and frightful monster that can be ever imagined in an eternity of madness. And he dwelt in Shamash. And everything, O Nimrod, the whole existence, all what we have seen here, was alive, palpitated, and was part of he. But, you must rejoice, O Nimrod, because neither he could do anything against the primordial sign of HK. Turn into a tree. Ordered Shamash to the dragon Enlil and confuse in the primordial gnosis of your fruits the primordial sign that remember as the unknowable. Suddenly, intrepid Nimrod, I found myself on the peak of a hawthorn tree, an apple tree, a rose bush, an almond tree, a tree which was all at the same time, a tree which fruits contained the secret of the serpent, the wisdom of the creator Enlil, the knowledge that the demons cares, because is the inherence of the animal men, and the chosen people's body. That tree was pending from black abysses, and reached to Shamash. I began to descend and many infernal creatures were lurking me, but all of them fled when they realized that I was carrying the sign. I was very worried, because I had to comply with the mission to find the path to return to the origin, just as was entrusted to us by the wise Conates. All the hope of the race was on me, and I could not fail. And worst of all, I was hearing the voice of Shamash, who was speaking to Dog of Heaven, who was saying, "O Sirius! O Zion! O divine dog! Your never-smirched face must contemplate how the followers of Christus Lucifer, the envoy of the unknowable, they rise against the plan of the One, they defy the cosmic laws, seek to abandon the universe of suns. Will we permit, the architects of all the worlds, that the slave spirits, set free from the yoke of cycles, the Maventars and Pralayas? Answer, O you, who lives in the peace of the One. Tell us, if we can accept that the anointed Lucifer, the Christus, reveals the mystery of the real, to the spirits that are attached to the evolution of our holy wills. Behold that the envoy has established in our mansion, and from there, he encourages the redemption of the pure blood. He illuminates the inner self of the men, with the new sun that no one sees, a black sun that evokes the divine origin of the spirit, and awaves the nostalgia at the return. Will we permit this abomination, O Sirius? If they discover the path of return to the uncreated worlds, what will be of our planetary chains, entrusted to the doubtful development of the monad? We must stop them. O Sirius Zion, shepherd dog one, who takes care of the cosmic flock. Sink your teeth in the Redeemer serpent, and liberate us from the threat of the spiritual liberation. And maintain forever the slavery of those who are similar to the unknowable, without knowing what they are. O Nimrod, fear not! Exclaimed the princess, when she noticed that the countenance of the moribund Casset's king was turning darker. We have triumphed, O you, the defeater of Crocodile. While the demons were screaming with their blasphemous voices, around the whole world, I was trying to fulfill the mission of the race, and find the path to return. For it, I was concentrating my attention in the black sun, due to, it was the only way to conserve the strategic advantage, obtained by the purity of blood, when a vividly light emerged from behind that racial center. Was a green ray, of ineffable purity, which crossed the uncuttered center and revealed, for our lineage, the original gates of the lost mansions. O Nimrod, in an instant, everything became clear, all confusion was dissipated. I could never be astray anymore, because I knew that we have never been lost, neither confused, nor sinned, nor fallen. Moreover, we have never moved. O Nimrod. When the totality of the great deceit was dissipated, I had the certainty that we would not have to return, due to, we were there unknowing it. We have conquered the freedom of the spirit, break Nimrod. And the absolute possibility to be ourselves, our own creation, to be ourselves, in the womb of our own birth. Is the will of the unknowable, divine Nimrod, that we can't do anything. Princess, Issa pronounced the last words, accompanying the last whisper, of the Hyperborean king. He already had the secret of the return to descend from the hawthorn, when I saw you, in the entrance of the infamous initiate cavern, but, was good to give a proof of the purity reached by the lineage of S, that the final battle between the cassettes of Nimrod, and the demons of Chang-Shampala be released. To perpetuate the remembrance of this feat, in the racial memory of the men, who are still chained, and to be evoked at the end of the era of the fish, when the 13 gods, will recover the crown of Lucifer, and will definitely awake the Hyperborean populations. Then, Chang-Shampala with its demons will fall, and in an endless fire holocaust, the damn work of the demiurge Jehovah Satan will succumb. Nimrod was lying dead, in Chang-Shampala. Beside him, with a grimace of indescribable horror on his countenance, was the corpse of the Nephilim Cockabule, who had been master of magicians and sorcerers. His science had resulted useless, against the decision of the pure cassettes, and such failure demonstrated that for the man, transmuted into man of stone, is always possible to fight against the demons and win. Of course, that such spiritual victory can be also a defeat, if it is considered as defeat. Every victory that doesn't brings with it a material success ascertainable with the moral guidelines of the syncretized societies. Because the moral of a society is a function of its culture, and, as it was already seen, the culture is a strategic weapon for the synarchy. For this reason, everyone who fights against the satanic forces, the awake men, will be always branded as defeated. Because of this, the great being, that illuminates the inner path of men, Christus Lucifer, is called the god of the losers. Because all his followers always lose during the Kali Yuga. Hence, Nimrod the defeated, was lying dead in Chang-Shampala. His brave cassettes had been completely exterminated in an extensive area of the damned city, as far as his warrior Pharaoh guided them. At the reverberant light of the last fires, could be observed the dreadful ossuary in which the temples and courtyard had been converted. The first palace, called Mansion of the Manus, where annals of the root races are deposited and that was used by the masters of wisdom to train their envoys, was reduced to ashes. An enormous monastery, and various shrines dedicated to minor divinities, always destined to train envoys, it means, to tactically deceive them, also suffered the effects of the fire. Compared with these important losses, the resistance offered by the demons had been minimal. Only risked their lives, the vile Cockabule, and the Chinese master, who employed the Dorji, limiting himself to send legions of giant Haiwan Arkin, and hiding dwarves, against the cassettes warriors. As would be said, now, they utilized a tactical mass, composed by robots and androids. Is that they can't risk their lives, because they are very few. Millions of years ago, they were 200. Nimrod liquidated one of them. It is surely difficult to believe that so few of them be capable of so much. But, it must be thought that they have the support of thousands of masters, that is to say, initiates, animal men, souls of superior evolutional grade, and the strategic dominion of the planetary consciousness. Such endless midday remained unchanged during the entire Battle of Nimrod, and its approximated extension can be considered of some 12 hours. In the moment in which the Kasset king was agonizing, and the combat in Changshambhala was ending, the final prodigy shook Borsippa. All the available warriors had risen to the heaven, more than 4,000, including some visitants, and the city presented in that instant a rare aspect. With that crowd mainly composed by women and children that not ceased to scream, overlaying their protests to the background warrior music told by the women Kennet initiates. And that imposing tower, erected up to the sky in open defiance. And that hawthorn tree on its peak, that rosebush tree that symbolized the sublimation of the Matubahi, and the insertion in the cosmic hierarchies which Supreme Regent is who call himself one. And that endless noon without the image of Shamash. It is true that Borsippa presented a strange aspect on its last day. There were no slaves in Borsippa anymore. The lineage of Yah, the blood of Abraham, the Hamitic shepherds, would be saved. But neither were cowards to fell, when the lenticular silver appeared in the sky. Everyone remained speechless of amazement when the great silver rye emerged from the suspicious cloud. And everyone died in their places when the atomic ray hit the Tower of Nimrod. The developed heat was such tremendous, that the sand was molten and spouted as water. A mortal hurricane, an expansive circle of fire, departed from Borsippa, killing any living being, at 10 miles around. Another tactical Atlantean weapon was employed, giving fulfillment in this way to the request that Enlil and Shamash did to the dog of heaven, Sirius Zion, and that the Princess Issa witnessed. And once consumed the attack, the lenticular silver disappeared from every physical sight, returning to the center from where it had been projected, in Changshambhala. When the smoke was cleared, only the 7th part of Nimrod's tower was still standing. Shamash continued his journey towards Occident, and the hawthorn tree, and the gates of heaven not existed anymore. The nightmare had ended. The threshold was safe to go on, giving services to the Synarchic initiations, and the sons of the Midnight Sun had failed again. Only the racial remembrance of Nimrod's feet would remain, and the calcined rest of its tower, just as can be seen today, in the Tower of Borsippa, with the vitrified sand, by the nuclear heat still adhered, after the millenniums, to its walls. And would also remain the calumnies, invented by the Hamitic shepherds, and collected by Arab and Jewish traditions. In the Talmud, and in diverse rabbinic scriptures, it is possible to read, conveniently altered, part of that story. There is mentioned the Tower of Nimrod, from where his archers shot arrows to heaven, the Luciferian pride of the Kasset's king, his tower confused with the one of Babel, etc. Clay tablets engraved with cuneiform scripture had been also found, which narrate more objectively the events, and numerous kuderos, engraved stones that were usually placed in temples, and as territorial limits, with references to the feet of Nimrod. Perhaps, of all the falsifications realized around this Hyperborean exploit, the most insidious be the reference of Helm or Blavatsky in The Secret Doctrine, where is written that an elite of Assyrian Babylonian priests discovered the manner to escape from the evolution plan of the solar lecus, and abandoned the planetary concatenation with their population towards the stars, where they continue their evolution. It means that the aforementioned agent of the Synarchy pretends to capitalize the feat of Nimrod in favor of the Synarchic theories. The rest of the Kasset's people continued dominating for a while, but finally they merged with their Hittite cousins, due to, it has been already said, a race that loses its Kinates initiates is a moribund race, and, with Nimrod, had left forever the elite of Kinates initiates. However, the Hittite expansion took them to dwell in Borsippa again, which was reconstructed in part, but no one dared to touch the ruins of the terrible tower. In Changshambhala, the history of Nimrod is always present, and with the objective to prevent future attempts of this type, is that many envoys have been occupied for centuries to eliminate the proofs, and to confuse about the tactical methodology employed in the attack. Bray and Bishar have been two of the immortals of the wide fraternity that have worked more in this sense. Nevertheless, many Hyperborean populations imitated, in major or lesser measure, the exploit of Nimrod. One of them was the Viking people of Greenland, that opened the gates, closed then by Quibble and Columbus. Another, more recently, was the German people of the Third Reich, who countered with the Hyperborean wisdom of the elite of Conates initiates of the Black Order SS. The Führer of Germany could then, with perspectives of success, undertake the collective mutation of the race again, and try the conquest of heaven. But the results of this new Hyperborean exploit will surely appear, to whom are under the effects of the Synarchic magic, as a defeat. To end with this summary of the history of Nimrod, I will say that the Casset's king, his brave general, his initiates, and the entire population that died in Borsippa, undertaken the definitive return to the origin, guided by the indomitable Princess Issa. While the idiot Hawaiian demons were devouring their bodies in Chan Shambhala, and the king of the world was pronouncing his evening prayer, delayed 12 hours that day, by the indelible feet of Nimrod. In the Museum of La Plata, in Buenos Aires, is the famous Qudrat Kashru, discovered in Susa, where it formed part of the booty of the Elamite king Shukranakand. In the 12th century before Christ, on it was engraved the regal figure of Nimrod, treading the moon and the sun, and with the 8-pointed star, symbol of the planet Venus, over his head, with a ziggurat beside him, evoking his famous tower. Under this image are 2 columns of cuneiform scripture, in Hittite language, where is mentioned the death of the king, and is warned that no one must forget his feat. I will transcribe part of such relate according to the erudite version of Professor Ramirez, from the University of Salta, universally considered as the most accurate. Nimrod's death from a famous tower, which ruins are hither, Kim Nimrod to heaven hath gone. One day he shall return. But he hath not gone, to bow down before the gods. With the 10th bow he left, willing to slay and his arrows to Shamash hath heard, although, prompt hath recovered heel. But Nimrod hath gone. And soon, he shall return, a goddess'll death his path. Issa she is called. She is the own Ishtar, and a people accompany them, the brave Cassets they are, who beside him shall fight. Because Nimrod hath gone, and with us, is not any more. Although, the legend telleth that one day he shall return, with his 10th bow, willing to slay,